Good evening, everyone. I got a bit of a late start today, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to be setting up all the links and everything. Pardon my tardiness. Just setting everything up for the chat. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Let's see what we got here. And computer's been acting up, so hopefully it'll be a smooth show. Let me see if I... message Steve there. Like I said, I got a late start, so I'm seeing what I can do here. And copy. Doing some minor housekeeping here. So in just a couple minutes, I'll wait for a few people to come in. How are you, David? Wait for a few people to come in and let's see, here's the link in case you can make it. Okay, there we go. I'm just setting up the Aspire. So tonight's class is going to be about, how are you, John? Tonight's class is going to be about tiling on the CNC. Some of you have expressed interest in being able to, I'm just waiting for the programs to start. Some of you have expressed interest in being able to tile a large object on a smaller CNC. So we'll talk through that, and I'll show you a quick sample. We'll create something on Vectric, and let's see here. Resume. Just wait for the for my virtual PC on my Mac to start up. How are you, Frankie? How's everything? Okay, so just about ready. In fact, let me go ahead and start screen sharing. Figures. Just when I'm starting up. How are you, Steve?
Hey, Javi.
Just when I'm starting up, it turns out the Windows decides to update. I just got in, so I got a late start today, but bear with me all. Let me do this part. So, in the meantime, let me start explaining on what we'll be doing today. Some of you may want to create a large object, larger than your actual. Yeah, Jeff, I love Windows. Some of you may want to create a large object that's bigger than your actual surface. And Can it be done? Absolutely. It's a simple matter of placing registration marks in the appropriate locations and being able to orientate or orientate. And there's a word in there somewhere that I mean, but orient your toolpath the right way. What you first have to take into account is where the dividing line is, where the registration marks are, and where the dividing line. For instance, if you have a circle, and I don't happen to have a circle, but let's say you have a circle. I'm wondering where I put it because I had a circle. I'll just grab this. There's a circle. If you had a circle and say your image was only half, I mean your surface was only able to cover half the circle. Well, it's a simple matter of you have two ways to do it. Number one is you put obviously your image would have to be at least a little bit more than half the circle. Circle, square, it makes very little difference, but on the shape. But you would put two registration marks. In the case of a circle, dead center, and then you can take and flip the whole image around. In other words, you would do the whole image, you'd split it into two overlapping pieces, and you would carve one image, and then the other image you would take and flip it 180 degrees along with the two registration marks. So then you place your piece in this way on your board, half of it will be sticking out, do your engraving, then you take your registration marks, as long as they're down the center line, then if you flip it over this way, they will be in the opposite locations, but you will also be rotating the whole thing. That's one option. The second option is to create, and this gets a little bit more annoying or problematic or troublesome, about as annoying as this computer updating. You take one half with the two registration marks, and then you engrave the whole thing. And then on your spoil board, you take the image and just engrave the two registration marks down into the spoil board, or, well, that's what a spoil board is for. And then you can actually place your piece on it with the two registration marks. And when I'm talking about registration marks on a spoil board, think of it this way. You'll take, let's half-inch dowel, a 3/8 inch dowel, a quarter-inch dowel, whatever size dowel you wish, and you'll drill that particular size hole all the way through your piece and into the spoil board just a tad. And that way your registration marks, your dowels that you will use, even temporary, 91% complete. You will place those dowels into your spoil board, and that's how you'll register and tile. I'll go through it with you a little bit more visually once this thing pops up, which I'm beginning to see the background. There are other ways to likewise to hang on. Let me do a couple things here as well while and now I lose my mouse. It's just that kind of day. The mouse is in limbo while the PC is starting. So Another thing you can do is, now we're talking about tiling. We're not talking about doing three-dimensional sides. But, well, oh, Frankie just said that's how I carve two sides to a piece. Well, yes, it's a very similar technique. If you want to carve two sides to a piece, what you'll do is you'll place registration marks, preferably along. Think of it as your line of reflectivity or a center line, or you have to always have in your mind how you're going to refer to it when you switch one thing, when you flip the piece over. So you're carving this side. Let's say this is your entire workspace. You carve this area, like let's say it was a captain's wheel. And I'll be showing you when I do the captain's wheel on a video exactly how I registered it. Oh, thank goodness this came up. Come on. Give me the icons. All right. Starting Aspire. Give it a second. And then I'll flip to the screen. All right. So you're placing your registration marks, and then let's say you have one here in the middle, one here in the middle. Now, if the piece is symmetrical on both sides, no worries. You just put them down the center line, flip it over, and it's the same piece, like is in the case of a captain's wheel. But if the piece is different, then what's on the DVD? Let's see. Legacy Woodworking Demo DVD. I don't even know where I got this. I don't know if I ever read it, but Legacy Woodworking. Where was that from? Must have been some magazine or something. Some DVD from some magazine. Let's see. This is just about ready to pop up. I'm still waiting. So if you have, there we go, finally. Come on. Yeah, I love having dual screens too, and I got 3 screens, and it's still not helping. Let's see here. Hey, Reginald, how are you? All right, so I'm just, for those of you who just tuned in, I'm waiting for my Aspire to start up because my Windows was having some issues with some updates. And is there a copy of the video on YouTube of the Legacy DVD? I don't know. Ah, okay. Oh, there is a copy. Oh, good, even better. How are you, Hamlin? Let's see here. Ah, finally. Aspire is starting up. Okay, let's see here. And let's screen share here. Steve, am I screen sharing there? Okay, just double check. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Good. Just making sure here. Why? Okay. Yes. Goodbye, P-Touch. Why are you there? It wants to open every single. What was that? I know. Yeah, it was something over here. That was just plain weird. Okay. Let's create a new file. There we go. All right. So let's say the file was, for the sake of argument, we're going to make a file bigger than our surface area. So the file. Let's say we have a 4x4 CNC, and we're going to create a 48-inch by 96-inch 4x8 piece. Right, so we have our 4x8 piece, and let's say we were designing, because Jeff was actually asking about this earlier. Let's say you're designing the side of an arcade cabinet, which I will be doing soon, because I plan to do that that arcade cabinet that what's his face, Bob Claggett did in a video quite a while back, but I really like it. So let's just say I'm just going to create a quick little arcade cabinet facade here from what I remember from my arcade days. And let's do this, and then we'll go here. We'll go, yeah, let's just go, yeah, let's go straight to the edge here and whatever. So there's our arcade cabinet. Now, again with this, pardon me, there we go. So now we're gonna, I'll just create a 4x4 box. So I'll show you what the limitations are on my CNC, or rather on an average CNC. Let's see if I can. All right. So this box here delineates your workspace area. You want to cut this piece out, but you kind of don't have enough room. So here's what you do. You'll start by creating a couple of registration marks, and we'll make them, just for the sake of simplicity, we'll make them 1/2 inch. Now we know that the halfway point here is 48 inches high, so we'll say at the 48-inch mark, and we'll make the center point. We'll go say 2 inches out, so 2 inches and 48 create. There's a little registration mark, and then we're going to make another one. 46 inches, which will be 2 inches from the edge. So now we have those two registration marks. Now, one thing we would like to do also, first of all, is, since we're trying to do our best to work with a centered image. So let's make sure that this image is centered in the to the material. So your material is 4x8. Your image is now centered. Half of it is above the line, half of it is below this line here, and this line, in fact, let me go ahead and use a little guide and put it right at the center points. There's another one here at 24. So we have one at 24 vertically. We have one at 48. We have our two center holes. Oops. So what I would also like to do is create another 2 holes, another 2 registration marks, because we don't want to rely on just 2. That might be, we want a couple more would work better. And what we'll do is we'll do them, let's say 4 inches from the bottom, just for the sake of a number. You have to decide for yourself what works best. But there it is, 4 inches from the bottom. And now follow me on this, guys. The registration marks will come from the middle to the 4-inch mark. So if you subtract 48 minus 4, they are going to be, this point and this point will be 44 inches away from each other. And that's an important number, because whatever we do to one side of this mirrored line, we do to the other side of the mirrored line, because we're going to be flipping this whole thing around. So we'll take here and we'll put our point at 92, which if you do your addition, that's where I'll put the other two marks. Now, I just put the guidelines there for reference, but here's the actual creation of the marks. We'll go 92 on the Y, create, and we'll also go 4 inches on the Y, create, and that created the one down here. And then we'll go 4 and 4, create. Nope, sorry, that's 2. 2 and 4, create. And we'll also do the same thing on the top, 2 inches over and 4 inches down, or I should say 2 inches over and equidistant from the line. So this will be 92. And there we have our registration marks. Now what we'll do is the following. Now we have to split this piece up. Oh, and I have to see what I do about this mouse. Okay, so when we're, again, with the mouse. So when we're cutting this piece, we're actually going to cut this line, but we don't want to cut the edge. So imagine if this square here, let me see if I can move it here. This square, imagine if this square here, that's a 4x4 space, is your surface area. You're going to cut this edge with the 4x4 area, and then my mouse stops moving. Then you're going to create, you're going to have a second file, which will be the entire piece flipped 180 degrees. And here, I'll show you right now. Hey, Patrick, how are you? So we'll copy this piece. We'll paste it now. Let me group it just so I can. And just get it out of the way for a second. Unfortunately, didn't grab the rest of them. Here, this. There it is. That's the other one I want. Make that out of the way. Okay, so we have 2 copies now. This copy and this copy. What we'll do is we'll take. Let me quickly select this and group it, because I should have done that the first time. And by the way, when I'm here rushing through this, but it would behoove you, for those of you who want an extra vocabulary word, to work with different layers for each of these objects and make sure you have them grouped, because you don't want to be going through the trouble that I'm going through, moving stuff around just to get like that, just to get to the piece underneath it. Okay, so that ungroup. Let's try this again, shall we? Yeah, this is just becoming a mess. So let's take this. Zoom in, select one of these. Like I said, if you were to copy to a new layer, like I'm about to do, you wouldn't have gone through this trouble. But with our mistakes, that's how we learn. And hopefully you're learning from mine. So I have the centerpiece, the arcade cabinet, if you will, and the 6 dots selected. So I'm going to group them. And then I'm going to copy to layer to a new layer. And let's see here. Let's make this color green. All right, so we have our green one, and we have our, and we don't have the other one. How nice. Copy, paste. Okay. I just want to see where I have everything. Okay. Layer 2, I have that. Layer 1, I have 2 of them. How nice. Well, let's layer 2. I have the green one. Let's get rid of the green one. So let's get rid of this third copy in layer 1. Now I should have one copy of each. Here we go. We'll do a rotate now. And since it is completely centered along this line, we're going to rotate 180 degrees. And remember, whichever way you rotate this piece, that's the way you have to orient your board. So here's what you do. And again, I have to, this is best done visually. So one of these days I'll do something similar to this, maybe on a small scale, and create a video. But in the meantime, take and rotate this object 180 degrees using the center point. And there it is. So you now have layer 2 is rotated, and layer 1 is rotated. Layer 2 is right side up. So here's what you do. You have your original square here that delineates the work area. It's this here. And you're going to take and cut this section out, flip your entire board over, and then this is the tool path you'll use, and cut this section out. Because this piece, again, let's show both of them. This piece here, when you cut it out first, then you flip the whole board over, is this piece here. Now, what's important is we're going to have to only cut from here. We do not cut across here. So we will need to create a line in the middle now, namely this line here, straight across the 48. And you could barely see it, but there is a line there. And we're going to actually cut off everything off the top. In fact, right now we could do it very simply by doing the following. We could just draw a rectangle. So let's forget that line. The line is one way of doing it, but right now let me get rid of that one line. And you know what the area is. It's halfway. So let me just get rid of this little square. What we're going to do now is create a large box intersecting This is the important part, that it intersects at 48 inches. And then, and let's go ahead and create another one. So now here's what we do. We go to whichever, well, it doesn't matter. We have both layers selected. We take our selection tool, we select this one, hold the shift key down, this one, and then we subtract. So now we have just subtracted from this pink line here, we've subtracted that whole top section. And we're going to do the same thing here with the, sorry, let me get the whole selection here. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the green. If I can get this mouse to work right. So we'll go back to the selection tool. We'll select this screen area. So this one, and then the shift key. So this minus this will leave you with the pieces we want. Almost. And there's one more step. So we have our two pieces. We have our registration marks. And we don't need the registration marks at the top. Actually, we made a mistake by including the registration marks. As you see, half of it was chopped off. But we'll fix that now. So now we're going to go ahead and we'll select this tool. As you see, when we subtracted it, it actually, let me move this line out of the way here so you can see, it actually closed it here. So it closed both of these objects. We don't want them closed because we don't want it to slice right through our material. So we'll take it, we will right click on that line, and we'll say delete span. And now we have an open span there. And here we will go the same thing, delete span. So let's go back to recreate those two circles, and that's a simple thing to do. We just go to our little circles. We know that they are at 248, ½ inch, create, and 46, 48. Yep. And yep. Yes, Frankie, that's a great way to do it as well. I mean, there's many different ways to approach this, and I'm just showing one of a few. So we have our pieces, or rather, we have our yeah. Do we have to overcut the halves? I'm not sure. Yes, yes. But here's absolutely. I'm just showing the basic thing, how to complete the two, because some people will take and do a little just trim that little edge, because clearly what will happen here is, as Jim is pointing out, when you get up to here, and here I'll use a circle to, let's say this is your bit. The bit will go, I mean, a short answer to your question, no, you don't have to, because the bit should go all along this line and stop here at this end. The next side will, again, half the bit, I mean, as you see, the bit is going to be, the center point of the bit is going to be even with this. So that's where it should stop, which means that when you flip it over to the other side, and let's just see where this piece intersects with this piece. You know, I don't want to take them apart again, but basically as you can see, the outer pieces, it'll again start here or end here, whichever way you want to do it. It'll cut all the way down, it'll cut around, and then it'll end again right here. So in essence, if you imagine this thing being flipped around, your piece is overlapped already with this. But it would not be a bad idea to overlap the pieces and do a little bit of a pass. And when you're talking about a piece this big, it's not likely that you're going to get it spot on, because honestly, I mean, with 4 registration marks, I mean, we're going to do our best, but it's going to be very difficult. Particularly, I mean, you have to have an outfeed table here holding this other half of the plywood. You've got a huge piece of plywood. Just the process of turning it around might make this a little bit offset. So on the one hand, you could argue, well, it's nice to overlap it, but on the other hand, if you do overlap it, it'll be off. But then by the flip side, it'll be off by 1/1000th of an inch or even as much as 1/10 of an inch if you're not careful. But on the flip side, if you butt it up and don't overlap it, the cut could also be off. So I'm not sure if I explained myself well enough, but so let's, in other words, if you overlap it and let me put this circle again and let me put 2 lines. Let's say you overlap it and this is one of the sides and this is the other side. And they are, for all intents and purposes, they're butt up against each other. So, I mean, that's all well and good, because this circle will, if you'll imagine, cut up to here, up to the center point. And then when it's on the other side, it'll cut up to the center point. And this little joint here won't be seen. However, if it's slightly off, then you're going to get a piece that's cuts up to here, and then this one is going to be cut up to here, and you're going to get this little curve in the middle. And on the flip side, that's if you butt them together. If you do overlap them, let's say you overlap them, and the board isn't registered exactly the same thing will happen. It'll just be that one piece will cut all the way down to here, and the other piece will cut all the way to here. But this piece, as you can see, will overlap, and you'll get a little edge thing. So just be very careful about your registration marks and about the placement. Make sure you're spot on. You don't want any play, any slop whatsoever with those registration marks. So this is the simple way of doing it. Now, what you will do now, as far as the toolpaths are concerned, is you're going to create a profile toolpath. Hang on a second. Let's bring this back up here. Let's say I'm cutting with a 1/4 inch. You're going to cut on the outside, and it will assume that this is the outside. Calculate. And if you calculate it, you'll see that it is cut on the outside of the line. However, okay, so you can actually do both this piece and the 4 sorry if I'm sounding a little incoherent. I'm trying to, it's very difficult for me to walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm trying to do stuff, explain it, and think of my next step at the same time. So go ahead with your profile. You take and do the 4 registration marks. along with one piece, and you calculate. Okay, and nope, my mistake. You can't do that. Sorry. Let's try that one more time. Just this piece, because you're doing an outside cut on this piece. And then the next thing you'll do is you'll create a second toolpath, let's say with this piece. And again, we'll do another outside pass, calculate. And then profile number 3 will be, and I'll show you where it gets a little bit, where this all comes together. Profile number 3 will be the 4 holes, and you're going to be doing an inside toolpath. Or a pocket toolpath, either way works. Now, the ideal situation, inside, the ideal situation is if you have another piece of spoil board underneath this, fixed to the to your spoil board, and these circles here, this profile number 3, will actually go past the depth of the material. In other words, 1 inch. Now mine's going to be, it'll say it's going to cut into the sacrificial layer, and I'm going to say yes. So when you look at the toolpaths, let's look at it from the side. I'm not sure if you can see very well, but those little dowel holes are actually going through this piece and into the spoil board, and that's what you want. It's called a spoil board for a reason, and that will help you place dowels in those 4 pieces to align one side, and then flip the board over and do the other side. And now, for creating the toolpaths, you will do the following. This is how you do it. You have one profile, which it's the same bit, so it will create one toolpath out of these 2 profiles. So you save your toolpath, and one of your toolpaths will be called, let's call it top half arcade. And then what we'll do now for the next one is we'll uncheck this, but we'll, and check this. And for some reason or another, I have, oh no, that's right. And then we'll save that toolpath as bottom half. So what's happening now is, if you preview the toolpaths, I'm going to just preview the visible toolpaths. The first one you did is this. You're going to cut it, and it will cut the top half. You're going to take these things off, and actually, you're going to take this off, these 2 dowels really, because they're the only ones that will function. And then you will flip it over, flip your board 180 degrees, and then you will cut, well, these 2 toolpaths, which should be down here when you do it. Unfortunately, I would have to show you on 2 different things. So this piece physically will be up here, and it should line up perfectly with this, and that's how, and then you will cut the bottom piece. And that's the simple way to tile items. And the same thing works if, let's say, your piece is, okay, let's save this for a second. Arcade 1. And let me save it again as Arcade 2, just because I'm going to be messing with it. Now, let's say, for instance, you have your work area is 4 foot by 2 foot, and you only have a 2 foot area. The other option that you can do, let me just do one thing here. Rotate. And 24.8. All right, so let's say you have your arcade cabinet here, and you actually have a very small pivot point. Create a bunch of these registration marks, equidistant, say 6 inches a piece, 6 inch, 6 inch, 6 inch, 6 inch, and then again you do something similar. You create a file here, you create a file here, you create a file here, and again you're going to have to do it instead of 2 pieces like a 4x4. You'll have to do it in 4 pieces or 5 pieces. So I mean, it just there's no limit other than the width of the gantry. Let me go ahead and stop screen sharing here. Yes, you will. Once you have the dowels in place, it will redrill. That's the other thing you. In this particular scenario, see, I'm used to doing different objects where you need the holes drilled over and over. So in this particular scenario, you don't really need the center holes for the second piece. I just put them there as a matter of fact, and I probably shouldn't have. But all you need is the 2 dowels in the center, and you flip them over. Now, likewise, you could actually trying to think. See, anything you do, you need to have a registration mark of sorts. I'm used to working with flipping the things over. That's why I put 4 registration marks on either side, because if this was the case where I'm doing, like for instance, one of these objects that I did once, I did a recessed handle. So the handle was a lot thinner. This one clearly, there's nothing on this side. This was all done from this side. All I did was a simple profile, an inner profile, and a pocket with a little dish cutter for the edge, or a round over bit you could use. But if I wanted to, I could take the piece, I could just cut halfway through, but drill 2 registration marks, say 1 in the center on top here, and 2 on either side, again, equidistant from the center line. So all I would have to do is flip the entire board over, put the dowels in on these 2 sides and this side, and it would know that this was exactly in the right spot, and you would first do your little pocket here where it would just have a very thin handle on top by pocketing this whole handle, this whole half. So you would profile halfway down, from this side, and then you would just pocket this whole thing out, and that would leave the handle clear. On this side, you have the option of either going all the way through on this side, or for safety, just to have the whole piece there, you would just do the half or the little over half. So you're basically cutting half of the profile here and half of the profile here, and you'll emerge with the piece removed. Other options are to go all the way down, and this is the safer option, is go all the way down and just put tabs, and just don't mess with the profile on this side. I mean, with this section of it, just this. You have to consider whatever piece you're doing, and just come up with different scenarios. It's all about conceptualizing and visualizing how the router moves, or how the CNC moves, or how you program it to move. So there's so many different scenarios. If anybody has any issues that they have, or any particular problem, like dirty glasses, if anybody has any particular issues or any particular projects that they want to just shoot my way and say, hey, Javi, how do you do this? I want to do this, and I can't figure out how. By all means, send them my way, and I'll be happy to do a show about them. Like Jeff asked me, how do you do an arcade cabinet? Well, it's a simple thing. You draw 2 holes. You draw the whole arcade cabinet, draw 2 holes in the middle, do the bottom half without cutting across, flip the whole board over, line up the holes, and then clamp the whole thing down, and do the other half in a 180 degree. The other option is, what you could actually do is, and I'll share this with you now, and it's kind of the same thing, really. Hang on a second. Here we go. The other thing that you could do is, you have this piece already created in one piece. Those 2 registration marks, no matter where you put them on the page, they're going to be what demand. So you can actually just cut off the top piece, as I think it was Frankie was saying, or one of them was saying. You can actually just cut off an overlapping piece. So let's say I take this, and I would cut off this piece, and you know how to do that because I just showed you how to subtract, and then chop this off. And I'm talking a piece well past the, because some people, let's say you have a 4 foot by 5 foot, just for the sake of argument, you would cut this piece off. Then what you would do is, you'd take the whole original piece with the 2 registration marks and move it down and cut off this piece. As long as you have these registration marks, you're doing the same thing with your board. You're moving the whole board down and you're lining them up. But the problem with this is, you're going to have to create the registration marks first in the spoil board before you put the piece on. So the way I did it, you just avoid that. You just avoid doing the having to do it that way. Let's see here, and there. Okay. So I mean, there's like I said, there's a few ways of doing this. You just have to consider where you're going to put your registration marks, and then how to cut it. The first pass should be creating the registration marks in the wood and in the spoil board. And so in the case that I showed you, you have those 2 center marks, goes right through into the spoil board. Your piece is, I assume, locked down from the beginning for that first cut. So as long as it's clamped or screwed down or whatever, don't worry about your registration marks. You're about to create them. And then after you do that and you flip it around, that's when you need the dowels to place your, to line it up. There's more ways to line it up. If you're not really too critical about being down to the thousandths or anything like that, you could just grab a smaller than, take a dowel and sand it to just a little less than ½ an inch, or make the hole a little bigger than ½ an inch. And just use the dowel, just manually, just place it there and screw the thing down and clamp it down as best you can. If it's a huge piece, like in the case of the arcade cabinet, a 1/10 of an inch is not going to matter much. well, 1/10 maybe, but a 32nd of an inch is not going to make much of a difference, and nothing that a little bit of sanding can't take care of. So there's that. Any other interesting conversations out there? I haven't been watching the chat. Hey, TJ. Yep. 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 That's the way I do it as well. Well, it depends. That's the way I do it on this machine. On the other machine, unfortunately, on the new Colossus, the way I have it set up, I can have a 4x8, a full 4x8 sheet in, and I could do pretty much 52 inches by 6 foot. But unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, the gantry is the limiting factor. So I cannot put, as big as Colossus is, the gantry is only 6 foot wide. So I can't put the 8 feet section there, which means I have to put the 4 foot section there. So the way I have it mounted, if I want to use it vertically, well, if I want to use it horizontally, my piece will, if I want to slide it, it'll slide into the wall. I can't do that. If I want to use it vertically, it'll slide into the floor. So I can't do both sides that way. So I'm limited to doing one side, either the top half of the board on the vertical side, or when it's when it's horizontal, or when my machine is vertical, I could do the bottom half, and then I flip the board over, make sure the registration marks align, and do the other half. And a lot of people have a similar issue because their CNC machines are not exactly mobile. Many people, so they'll have it butt up against the wall. So tiling is most often done. It's great if you have it to go through, if you have it in the middle of if you have the space. But if you're butt up against the wall, unless you pull the CNC machine out, you basically have to do the 180-degree trick. If it's not a trick, procedure, formula, process, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that it is. That it is. It's I'll eventually have a couple of videos out, but as some of you know, I've recently I purchased another business, and I've been quite busy with just getting it all squared away and ironed out, and it's taken a lot more time than I expected, which just kind of ironic that I retired a year or two ago, semi-retired. I still was running a couple businesses, and I for the love of woodworking, but you know, you gotta pay the bills. Yeah, yeah. Um, well, let's see. Uh, Surfacing particle boards with a straight cut bit. No, I've done something similar to that, but you got to be careful. You might have, Frankie, you might have either the it depends what size bit you're using also. If you have a very small bit, or if it's going very fast, or if you have a very big bit and it's going very fast, basically if your bit's going too fast, uh, or you're moving too slow, or the bit's dull and not perfectly sharp, you're going to get some you're going to get some burn. If you start to get burn, you'll get little fireballs. But I mean, was there any other reason for the fireballs, Frankie? Because I'm kind of curious about that myself. I know Dave Gatton numerous times. He avoids drilling or pecking with a downcut bit because it creates because it could start a fire. I've been very lucky with my I'm there you go. Hey, Dave, how are you? Just talking about you. Um, Speaking of the devil, he walks right in. No, so I know Dave has mentioned this before that he won't peck, and you shouldn't with a downcut spiral. I've done it on occasion, and I've always gotten a nice little bit of black soot around. So if you do short pecks and you got a good vacuum system, I wouldn't chance it either way. But surfacing or pocket holing, just make sure. I mean, I highly recommend everyone, if you don't have a good vacuum system. There's a lot of people like, oh well, I want to film it. I don't want to have a good. I don't want the vacuum system on there. Well, then get a blower system or something, because I've had occasion where I've created some major smoke just from the pile of sawdust that was collecting around. Um, and that's a very dangerous situation. One or two times I was scared that it was just going to all flame up. And if you guys have ever seen videos of people lighting sawdust and watching how it almost blows up as fast as dynamite, it's absolutely incredible. We're going to YouTube those videos, and that'll put a little bit of the fear of God into you for working with sawdust. That's what I think about all the time. I try to have I just get paranoid about it, and I try to have my dust collection system. I try to pipe it out outside, because if there's going to be a stray ember going out and lighting that whole powder keg, I want it to be outside, not in. But anyway, yep. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And speaking as somebody who went through all of that, because I'll share my experience with you, and take it for what it's worth. It's most of the time when you're talking about calculating chip rates and things like that. First of all, that's a lot of work. Uh, I have nothing against it. I think everyone should know how to do it. It's mostly for metal work, really, because it's very difficult to calculate chip rates based on feeds and speeds, because of the different densities in different woods, the different characteristics of different bits. That's something more. That's something that's more often done on an industrial level. Because you need to know on an industrial level. You're doing a production. You're doing high production. You need to know exactly the fastest you can go. Remember, the faster you go, on the one hand, the more tear out you may get. But if you're doing it right, the faster you go, it creates the perfect size chip. You do not want to. If you're getting sawdust in your if let's say you have your dust extractor off, and you're getting fine powdered sawdust, you are going way too fast of a speed, or way too slow of a feed rate, and you're not doing yourself any favor. You're overheating the bit. The bit actually uses larger chips to, aside from the airflow and everything, and this is more prevalent again in metalwork, but it uses bigger chips to dissipate heat. When you have smaller chips, you're creating a lot more friction, and keep all those things in mind. The chart, yeah, exactly as Herb said, the charts will get you close, so you don't have to go too slow and or too fast. As it's been said many times in many different shows, use your ear. If you've come, as I have, from a background of years and years and years of hand routing or table routing or both, you know what to listen for. I mean, with hand routing and table routing, it's also in the feel of the machine. But you know from working with those tools, if you have, not only how the machine feels, but how it sounds when you're feeling the chatter, when you're feeling too much tear out, too little tear out, too slow, too fast. Listen for those different changes in the. I mean, I assume all of you by now who have been working with CNC for over a month know what it sounds like when it's digging out too much material, bogging down, or made a mistake and it's hitting the spoil board, or possibly even gone through an aluminum hold down clamp. I mean, it's a distinctly different sound, and every one of them just e-stop, you know, and you'll never hit the e-stop fast enough because the damage has already happened. But the point is, you know the sounds. Well, to a much finer degree, listen to the sounds for the different surfaces. What I like to do, and I recommend this to everybody, I wish I had my, I'm going to create a new one. I threw away my old boards that they were scrap. Take a piece of scrap, say a piece of, you know, let's say you're working with melamine particle board. Take a piece of scrap. Create fluted toolpaths. In fact, you know what? I'm going to make next week's class on honing in feeds and speeds using this method. Create lines. You're basically going to create a fluted toolpath going from the surface down to the middle. I mean, down to 3/4 deep, back up to the surface. So it'll go down and it'll go up. And then over here, you're going to create a few of these. One's going to be running, say, use 1 bit, 1/4 inch straight bit, or whatever you use for profiling. Go down and up. It's going to be a different speed. Let's say 1 speed. So put the speed at 8 or 10,000 RPM. You don't want to go any faster than that for most jobs. It's very rare that you're going to need 24,000 RPM for anything. So have a different feed rate on each one of these. 10 inches per minute, 50 inches per minute, 100 inches per minute, 400 if your machine's capable of that, and create, say, 10 lines. You're going to create sample lines from 10, 20, 30, 50, 80, 100, 120, 200. And you'll notice the difference. Sometimes you may not notice anything at all. If you don't notice anything at all, you've got a sharp bit, you've got a good strong machine, and the material that you're using is easy to cut. By all means, go to the fastest rate you can, because that'll save you some time. But if you do notice tear out when you're working with, say, plywood on the faster speeds, yeah, I mean, you will notice a difference with plywood. The slower the speed, you're going to get a beautifully, don't need any sanding kind of cut. But you can also achieve that using the tricks like or techniques like working with a profile. I mean, with a last pass, running the piece twice to get rid of burrs. There's other techniques other than having a. I mean, I learned long ago you do not want to take a piece and slow it down to 5 inches per minute just because it's going to avoid all sanding. Cut the thing as fast as you can and then come back and cut it at a reasonable speed. And not as fast as you can, because you don't want to go overboard and create so much tear out that even the second pass won't take care of it. But the point is, next week we'll work on that little test pattern for you, and it'll help you gauge those feeds and speeds. So hopefully you've learned a few things. We've covered the registration marks and how to tile pieces. We've talked a little bit today about using a chip calculator. Google them; they're everywhere. To get close, as Herb put it, and from there you can gauge your thing. We've talked about listening to the bit. These are just various techniques that you should use to hone in your skills. Sometimes I get lazy and I'll just put all my feeds and speeds at 8,000 and 80 to 120 inches per minute. If you want something reliable, 80 inches per minute, and 10,000 RPM, 8,000 RPM. For most, not for everything, but for most projects, works perfectly fine. And then use a few techniques like coming in close, and you'll see that But again, every time is different. And keep in mind, as we're talking about feeds and speeds, when you're talking about cutting something large, say like that arcade cabinet, if you're putting in 200 inches per minute, that's going to fly through that because it's going to ramp up to speed, and you got to be careful with that because you're going to get a lot of tear out. But again, I mean, you shouldn't be working with 200 inches per minute unless you've got a cabinet shop with a high-speed mill and all that. But let's say you're working with 200 inches per minute on a very small project, and you're always going, well, I work with 200 inches per minute all the time because it's fast. No, it's not. If you're working on a small project, it will never, take a good look at your speeds, it will never get up to 200. You're lucky if it'll get up past 100 if you're working with a lot of little jogging points and up and downs. So, bottom line is use a reasonable maximum rate, we'll call it, because, hey, Jim, how are you? Because when we're talking about feeds and speeds, keep in mind that number is maximum. It's the maximum speed. And the maximum speed only comes into play if you're cutting a circle. And I'm not talking a circle with a lot of little points, because depending on how you program it, the toolpath, you could make a circle out of a lot of little points, and it'll go arc to arc to arc. I'm talking about the circle with the 4 points and you'll see it. It'll speed up and slow down 4 times for the arcs. So when we're talking about feeds and speeds, we're talking about maximum feeds and speeds, and they really only apply to long straight cuts, long curves, including big circles. Short of that, you'll never get up to the full speed. Next week, as I mentioned, we'll do a few test patterns. I'll show you how to do a few test patterns to achieve the finest cuts you can. And let's see, does anybody have any more questions now, since we're 15 past the hour? Yep, absolutely correct, Frankie. I mean, I've gotten my Colossus. If you can believe it, I have actually reached a speed and saw it. I should have taken a picture of it. I think I'll do it again. 800 inches per minute. Now, at 800 inches per minute, first of all, that's a rapid speed. It will never cut at that. It jammed within 3 seconds of running at that speed. So it's not sustained by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but I did get it running that fast, which is, cool. But realistically, you don't need any machine past, this machine is capable of 600 inches per minute. I've got it limited to 400, and I've never had it past 200 for anything. And it's a machine more than capable of those speeds. You don't need anything past 200. It's like, and this is not a Bill Gates, what is it, 784K or 128K is. Steve, what did Bill Gates say was the you'll never need more than X number of K memory. It was a famous statement, but anyway. But I will stand by my, you do not need more than 200 inches per minute to reasonably to cut most projects. Not for a hobbyist CNC. So if anybody doesn't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this session. And you guys have a wonderful evening. And thank you all for dropping by. Next week, as I mentioned more than once, we'll do some fluting toolpaths, and I'll show you how to hone in your machine, assuming you have a decent bit. So thank you all.